All right, welcome everybody to Pursuit Live. We had a little technical difficulty here, so we do have a great guest on for you tonight. So just bear with us. Dave is not joining us today. He is up at Turkey Camp. Rob will be joining us later on, so please just bear with me for a little bit. We did have a little bit of technical difficulty here. So Vito, give us 1 second so we can work through this. Oh man, I didn't even have my audio on. Like we're running into all kinds of problems tonight. So just bear with us. Um all right, so let me recap here. Officially, this is your last chance to purchase tickets for the 2024 Pursuit Live fundraiser. Next Friday, 7:30, right here on Pursuit Live, we will be drawing the winning ticket for the 2024 Matthews Lift with the box of arrows, G5 broadheads, QAD rest, Trophy Ridge React sight. What else? The stabilizer, the quiver, Delta McKenzie shooter buck target, and the ground blind. All that could be yours. $20 a ticket gets you in. Please hit up myself, hit up Rob, hit up Dave. We'll get you in. All right. All the proceeds are going to the American Bear Foundation, Wounded Warriors in Action, and the NYPD Archery Team. Right now, we've raised a ton of money for these great organizations. We're happy to do this. All the proceeds are going to them. So please, if you haven't already, reach out. We'll get you entered. As soon as Vito gets on, we'll get the show started. Dave is not with us. Dave is officially up at Turkey Camp. He's had some good action. He would join, but there is no service up there, and I can attest to that. I've been there. Rob will also be joining us, hopefully a little bit later. So with that, we do have some other announcements. As everybody knows, we're always looking for guests here on Pursuit Live. If you're interested in joining us, please hit up myself, Rob, or Dave, and we'll get you in. We do have a great lineup so far going through into this summer, and we do have some great shows lined up for you. Now, without any further ado, because we've had nothing but problems so far, I do want to introduce our guest. This is Mr. Vito Castellano, the owner and lead instructor from Silver Lake Tactical. Vito, thank you for joining us.
Chris, thank you. You look a couple of technical difficulties, but we powered through it.
That's it. Listen, that's what it's a live show. Things are going to happen. We're going to make it work one way or the other.
Well, I appreciate the invitation very, very much. I love what you guys do. It's important to a lot of people in the outdoor community, and you always have my support and friendship. And again, thank you very much for the invite.
Well, no, thank you, sir, for everything that you've done. And as you know, as a former first responder, I just want to take a second and thank you for everything that you've done for the community, and thank you for your service, sir.
Thank you, and thank you for your service as well.
Well, thank you for the support. So I guess we'll just jump right into it because we've delayed the show long enough as it is. So if you could, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about yourself? Just give us your backstory a little bit.
All right. So I started my law enforcement career in 1995. I started out as a peace officer. I was a sheriff's deputy for Westchester County. It was a part-time position. At the time, I was very hungry to enter law enforcement. I was taking a lot of exams, and by having that opportunity as a peace officer, it solidified my desire to be a police officer. A couple of years later, 1997, I was hired by the Harrison Police Department in Westchester County, where I coincidentally grew up and live. It was a good experience on a lot of different levels. As I was progressing through my law enforcement career, one of the things that was a growing passion in me was training in particular, firearms training and tactics training. I showed a natural aptitude toward it throughout my career. And I was earmarked pretty early in my career to be an instructor and go to instructor schools. With less than 5 years as a police officer, I became a firearms instructor, and then became a defensive tactics instructor a couple of years after that. For the majority of my career, I was the primary weapons and tactics instructor for my department, as well as doing a lot of training at the county level as far as police recruits. And I did a lot of training on the state level too, being part of DCJS programs and so forth. Regardless of the rank that I achieved, and I retired at the rank of lieutenant. I was, after 8.5 years of being a patrol officer, I became a patrol sergeant. And then ultimately 6 years after that, I became a lieutenant, and I retired at that rank after 20 years of service with the Harrison Police Department. Regardless of my rank, I was always passionate about training. Obviously, as I climbed the ranks, I supervised our training unit, not only being the primary instructor, but supervising it as well. And there's one common thread to all of this. And as it relates to self-defense as well, because we understand not only as, people who operate firearms, hunters who operate a variety of different weapon systems, these are perishable skills. And you cannot afford perishable skills in the world we live in, especially in law enforcement, the military, et cetera. Therefore, ongoing regular training is the thing that increases officer survivability. And that's what it's always been about for me. Yes, I was a department leader. Yes, I was also a tactical operator. I was an element SWAT leader when we had a SWAT team for about a 4-year period. But nothing was more important to me, and still is, and I still have very close ties to the local law enforcement community, is to get my people home to the people they love, period. And I took that responsibility very, very seriously, which led me into my retirement plans. I will say that I literally retired from the police department with a very heavy heart, and I'll get to that in a moment. I unfortunately had to make a decision after 20 years to retire, because during my police career, I sustained multiple lumbar and cervical spine injuries. Knowing that I sustained permanent nerve damage in certain parts of my body had to force me to understand that, I can't do the job the way I need to do the job and what the job deserves. So I retired with my head held high, but injured and broken. I knew in my retirement, I had to continue my passion for training. And all of my law enforcement certifications are in perpetuity. I can train law enforcement at multiple levels, indefinitely. But I started to turn my direction toward civilians and the Second Amendment community. And again, even in the area that we live in, there's a general lack of knowledge. There's a general, for lack of a better term, an intimidation factor for folks who've never been introduced to the shooting sports and do have a desire to enter the shooting sports, maybe hunting as well, and and being a bit more passionate about self-defense, which I think is it's been a very driving force in the United States and as well as where we live and work over the last several years. So I decided to become a civilian instructor with the backing of the NRA and New York State DCJS, and I started my journey teaching civilians, which has been a very, very rewarding experience on a lot of levels. And that's where I am today. And that's what Silver Lake Tactical is all about. It's about safe, responsible, educated firearm ownership and use.
Yeah, that's a hell of a story.
I try to condense it, you know.
So if you could take us into a little bit of your background I know you and I were talking before the show. Tell everybody kind of how you got into the outdoors. How did you first become exposed to hunting, and what kind of made you what get infected with the bug, I guess?
So, going back to, my teen years and, my early 20s, I did have a desire to pursue hunting and the shooting sports. And although I did have a mentor or two in my extended family, it was not something that was part of my immediate family. There was always a respect for hunting. There was always a appreciating the gifts of wild game, which my family loved to eat. But I didn't pursue it then. I began to pursue it probably in my mid-20s, about 24, 25 years old. And I started with getting involved in the shooting sports. I started with doing some trap shooting, buying a shotgun, buying a self-defense shotgun, eventually getting my pistol license. And then that really was a driving force for me to not only experience different levels and aspects of the shooting sports and the shooting community, but to say, hey, I think I have the tools, I have the skills to begin to learn how to hunt, to do this on myself, do this for myself, do it for my family, and blend these things together. And kind of coincidentally, but not related, it was also about the same time that I began my law enforcement career as well. So it all kind of melded all together.
Okay. Now, in your experience as a hunter, I know we kind of got into your philosophy on things. Why don't you kind of share everybody your philosophy on hunting and like how you take an approach to the outdoors?
So, starting with a family hunting camp, and I joke around by saying it, kind of like hardcore, old school, like Italian, kind of hunting camp where it's pretty sustenance driven. Matter of fact, it was kind of like a running joke in camp that, my godfather, my uncle, he would amortize the amount of taxes he paid on a particular year based on how many deer we got. So he would say, all right, we got 4 deer this year. It's $300 a deer. That type.
I didn't think. Listen, who knew 2 of my favorite things, hunting and tax evasion, would be like
exactly.
Like, come on, that's awesome.
And it was a point where I shouldn't say there was a pressure to harvest, but it was an open camp where all the doe tags were basically put on the kitchen table, and obviously transferring a DMPs legally and so forth. But it was if instead of see something, say something, see something, shoot something. It was more along those particular lines. So I guess I was always driven more along the lines of being a meat hunter, harvesting and so forth. And then, my wife getting into hunting very quickly thereafter. We've been married almost 31 years, but we've been hunting together 30 years. And it became a source of pride and a source of sustenance. And that's how we raised our children. Both of my kids, when they got their first few teeth, their first meal was backstrap.
That's what I like to hear.
And, and they love it. They love it. My younger one's a bit more passionate than my older one. My older one has other hobbies. But yeah, my kids, grew up on venison. I'll tell you a funny story that I just thought of. So when my youngest was about 4 years old, we had just started an opening day on a new property. It was actually a small horse farm in the Goshen area. And we had a hell of an opening day. We harvested 4 deer that morning, my wife and I, and we got to the processor, and the processor had us first on the list. And the next day after the morning hunt, we were coming home with fresh meat, and it wasn't even frozen yet. And my wife said, which is a Sunday tradition in our home, she said, we're going to make fresh meatballs. So my my son he was just having a ball. I mean, he was eating 2, 3 meatballs, a little 4-year-old kid, And I'm like, I go, Michael, I says, can you believe yesterday that meatball was running in the woods? And he goes, Daddy, meatballs don't have legs. But yeah, it's been a great source of pride. I mean, our opportunities now where our property is located is in an antler restriction zone. So of course, we're doing everything, according to the letter of the law as we always did. But have to be a little bit more select, obviously. No longer, see something, shoot something anymore. But yeah, we incorporated archery hunting right out of the gate, and we had a sidebar conversation, and everybody who's ever drawn a bow knows that bow hunting gives you the education of woodsmanship and learning about whitetail deer and other big game species that you just don't get because you're in this observation point, and being diligent, being patient, learning a lot of things. So all of that was great. But at the same time, it just gave us, 2 or 3 more times to be in the woods, that many more opportunities to be out there and hunt and harvest game.
Now, I know you like to hunt with all implements, but if you had to pick one, what would you say is probably your favorite experience? Would you say bow hunting is probably your favorite all around experience in the woods?
All around, yes. And I still bow hunt with a compound bow. Because of my neck injuries, it's becoming a little bit more challenging. But the best days in my hunting career were, having a climbing tree stand strapped to my back, walking up a ridge with a bow, and walking down that ridge later with a deer. So yeah, I would say it's meant the most to me. It taught me the most and really has made me the hunter that I am. I do really enjoy late season muzzleloading hunting. I wish, kind of like the northern zone, there would be early season opportunities. I think that would be great. That would be fun. And I've actually crossed over or had added crossbows to my weapon systems for for hunting. And for me, it's been because of a physical adaptation to that. My injuries. I've been to a couple surgeries, and crossbow hunting and the ability to harvest a deer with a crossbow has kept me in the woods, and brought me where I need to be. So, I'm very open-minded, as I was saying, and we agree that, our hunting community, is best united and supporting each other, because we're all who we have. And then, and any hunting implement that I think can bring food on your table, or a credit card bill at the taxidermist, is a good thing, and should be encouraged on all levels.
No, I would have to agree, and I know you and I were talking about it at length before, but it's and everybody that watches the show will agree that we are an outnumbered community here, that the anti-hunters are multiplying at an exponential rate, and the influx or recruitment of new hunters is a trickle at best at this point. And it's Dave's favorite saying is, if there's a world where there is no hunting, I don't want to live there.
I agree.
So, I mean, I don't whatever we can do to get more people into the sport. And I know we talked about it, about crossbows. The arguments that people have about, there shouldn't be crossbow hunting, there shouldn't be this, whatever gets you in the woods. Listen, we can't fight each other. A house divided can't stand.
100%.
That's it. We, now more than ever, we all need to kind of work together. Like, we shouldn't be pushing people away. We should be accepting people, embracing them with open arms. For the simple fact that if we're fighting with each other, we're making the case against us that much easier for them.
Right. And we all know what happens when things are divided. A personal story that I related to you earlier, if you don't mind me talking about.
Yeah.
So, when I said I retired from the police department with a heavy heart, I really did. And Chris, with all candor, if I could put a uniform on tomorrow, I'd do it. I miss it with all my heart, at the risk of tears. But I retired with the back injury. I ended up having back surgery after that. and I was pretty resentful toward it. And then I had a pretty heavy scare 2 years ago that required me to have open heart surgery. And everything went well, and all blessings are all around. But in some ways, I probably have to thank my back injury, because if I didn't have it, I might have been on the job, and who knows, I could have been a statistic. But I had my surgery in August of 22, and I had to wait 90 days before I could do anything. And unfortunately, I missed the entire month of October because I couldn't draw a bow the way I was healing. On day 89, post-op, I said to my wife, if I could pull back this crossbow, we're going hunting tomorrow. And I went in the woods, and I shot my first deer on my new property, which was a nice 9-pointer. But to have that gift to be back after at the risk of being dramatic, a pretty serious surgery with potentially scary outcomes, and what made me feel like me again was being in the woods, having that crossbow in my hand, and shooting that deer. And if I didn't have the opportunity to use a crossbow, I wouldn't have been in the woods that day.
Listen, it's like we've said, whatever gets you out there, however you get out there, just do it.
Exactly.
So I guess I'll ask you this question. What are 3 things that you have to have on you on every hunt?
3 things?
Other than your license and your rifle, obviously, but or your weapon. Just what are your 3 go-to items that have to be in your pocket or your pack or your pouch, whatever it is, on every hunt?
Definitely a rangefinder. And I don't care if I'm hunting with a bow or I'm hunting with a rifle. I don't leave my truck without a rangefinder. A compass, and for sure some type of deer call. Usually a grunt call. I'm not I wouldn't say I'm an effective caller. I know people who can call in a deer from a mile away, but I have had opportunities where I've been able to stop deer or bring deer in, with a grunt tube, and I think it's an indispensable tool.
I want everybody that's watching and that watches this later to take a note of that. Another guy that carries a compass. All right. I caught a lot of flack for that when I said it. I don't know why people don't understand that. And I got, there was one time I was out hunting, and this was the story that I told. I shot a deer at night, right at last light. I tracked it, got turned around, had a coyote literally following me through the woods as I'm dragging this deer. My GPS died. My phone was about to die. And I knew that I wasn't going all that far, so I didn't really pack all that well. With the last 1% of my battery, I called my buddy and I told him, I'm like, this is where I am. This is where I was sitting. This is the direction I went. And this is where I think I am. Come get me. My phone's about to die. And I just took a seat next to the tree and said, okay, I'll just wait until they come here.
That's it. I mean, technology is great when it works.
That's it. And after that, nope. Compass in my pack all the time, no matter what. And everybody said, oh man, well, what do you need that for? Like, oh, you living in the... No, I'm not living in the Stone Age. Practical.
I have been on more nighttime blood trails that I could probably remember. And I have had some very, very eerie feelings when I've gotten turned around. And these are properties that I know well. But when you're focused on specks of blood, on the ground, on your hands and knees, it's real easy to not know where you are.
Yeah. So I get, all right. So we'll kind of pepper this in, because instead of question and answer at the end, we'll just pepper it in throughout. Dave asked a pretty good question. Now, what's one thing you would like to see implemented into, hunter ed, like the basic hunter safety course, from your work experience?
From a law enforcement perspective?
I guess, yeah. I mean, from counting your law enforcement experience and everything, and the totality of your experience, what would you think that maybe could be an added benefit?
Well, I think there's, well, as far as hunter safety is concerned and firearm safety, obviously to go hand in hand, right? Understanding that, you need muzzle discipline and trigger finger discipline, and those two things go hand in hand. I would like to see more emphasis, if there isn't already, because I can't say I've had my fingers on the pulse of hunter training, because it's not something I do. I've sat through the classes with both of my kids, but one of the things that is constantly and continually reinforced in my classes, in my training, in my teaching, is not to have an over reliance of mechanical safeties. And I know that, on our hunting rifles and our hunting shotguns, part of the ready process, part of the preparation for the shot is disengaging and disabling some type of external safety. But I'd rather rely. That's great, but I don't want that to kind of diminish the fact that a safety is going to save you with improper handling skills. I basically, I'm obviously a very active pistol shooter. That's probably, as far as self-defense weapons, that and a home defense shotgun and an M4, where I had all of my law enforcement training, and that's what I primarily teach. Silver Lake Tactical at this point, by default, with the need of folks who are looking to get pistol licenses throughout New York State and the Hudson Valley, that's been my primary product. And I run primarily, polymer frame striker fire pistols. I know the big dedication in the 1911 community and other variants, as well as traditional double action pistols. But I continue to drive to my people that a mechanical, an external safety on a pistol is a mechanical device, and that can fail. And I would probably want to see a little bit more of that as we're teaching either our young hunters or new hunters that, a safety is not an emergency brake. It's not going to get you home safe. It's part of the process. It's an extra level of safety, but it's not a guarantee, and it can fail.
100% accurate. This is my safety, sir.
The safety God gave me.
So, I guess we can kind of move to another question that Dave asks. Who's your first call after a successful harvest?
My wife.
That's it. That seemed almost obvious.
And it's usually texting her from my tree stand to her tree stand.
Babe, I need help dragging this.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right.
Or I usually hunt the ridge top above her, and I get to, just stay put,
Now, I guess another question that we like to ask is early on in your hunting career, and I'm gonna repeat this question when we get into your business as well. Like, what were some early successes that you had, and then maybe some things that didn't go so well, and some lessons learned that you were able to pick up from that?
I had hunted 2 seasons, learning some very hard lessons. The first lesson I learned, it was the first day ever I was afield on an archery opening day. This was October of 1995. And not understanding how to read the wind, and controlling my movement in the stand. I had heard something about 5 yards behind me, and I had turned, and it was an 8-pointer. And he winded. His head went up. He got the classic wind. He winded me, snort, wheeze, stomped, and was out of my world. And I have since then been a scent control maniac as a result. That was a very bitter pill to swallow, but an important lesson to learn. Other things I have learned painfully over the years is knowing when and when not to track a deer, especially obviously as relating to an archery hunt. Having this eternal optimism that the deer is just a few yards away. You're going to see that white belly as soon as you get there. And really, really being honest with yourself, looking at that blood, if you could recover the arrow, saying, what, this is not bright red. This is not bubbly and pink. This is dark brick red. And this is a slow bleed. And I'm going to have to back out of here as much as I don't want to. And I had a couple deer that I lost, unfortunately, because of my stubbornness and my inability to be patient.
Well, I guess, and Dave always backs me up on this. Listen, if you do this long enough, things are going to happen. You're going to encounter this, and that's something
Yeah,
that anybody that's new to hunting, if I could instill something on them, it's like, listen, things are going to happen. You need to know when to go charging in and when not to, and when not to, you need to accept that and back out. And
yeah,
that's
that was
that's it.
a difficult lesson to learn, and it wasn't just it wasn't an overnight lesson either. But yeah, I've certainly become more patient in many ways, and obviously, bow hunting is going to teach you patience, right? Um, and you know, I'll I became a scent control maniac, more patient with my blood trailing, and again having this 100% reliance on a rangefinder. Um, to me, I won't go into woods without one. I lost probably my second deer that I shot with the bow because I thought I estimated the range properly and I was way off. I used the wrong pin, hit him in the brisket, and never recovered.
it it's gonna happen. You do it long enough. And I'm listen, I'm a rangefinder guy as well. I finally last year stepped up and spent the money. I bought a set of laser range finding binoculars, and now I have them with me wherever I go. So uh, I don't know. It's an essential tool for a bow hunter. I think even for a rifle hunter, right there with a compass, everybody should have one. That's just, I mean, that's my personal opinion. And
Agreed.
obviously you sharing that. So, all right. So I guess we can kind of roll into the meat and potatoes of this here. So let's get into Silver Lake Tactical a little bit.
Okay.
If you could kind of tell me what was really the spark that kind of ignited this idea to say, hey, this is what I want to do.
So it was much more than just a need to fill a void in my retirement. Um, you know, it, I knew being a retired lieutenant and being a former patrol commander, being third of command of an 80-person police department, I couldn't just go work for somebody. I don't know if that's pride or just knowledge of yourself. Um, and because I was considered and still is considered, excuse me, uh, uh, a weapons expert for lack of a better term. Um, even into my retirement, the questions didn't stop. Whether it was from other cops or civilians or wherever the case may be, I was the go-to guy to inquire to. And that kind of validated not only my need to stay relevant in the training community, but I had a demographic. I had an audience. I had people who needed my help. And being a first responder, you have that desire to help. You have that desire to serve. And like I said, having to swallow that bitter pill of not being able to be a cop anymore. And training being the most passionate component of my entire career, I knew this was something that I had to take to the next level, and that's what I did.
Now, I guess, and I knew I said I was gonna ask this question again. So, what were some, I guess, some early successes that you found after kind of starting your business?
The overwhelming appreciation from the civilian community, because at least I mean it could be pervasive at this point. Um, it takes a lot for somebody who has never been around firearms, has never had any training on firearms, who is feeling a lot of vulnerability that a lot of people feel insofar as the need for self-defense, the need for home defense. It takes a lot for that type of person to make that phone call and to make that contact and show up for that class. And then, once they get past their initial fears or concerns, they become so motivated. It's like somebody who's you know taken their first hunter safety class and spent their first day in the woods and realized that this was the best decision they ever made. And that is very, very validating for me. And I say this with all sincerity, and I've said it to every one of my cops that I've trained. I'm your instructor now. You're kind of stuck with me. You know what I mean? Unless you really want to, cut ties, I will be here for you through thick and thin, from learning to shoot your first round to, getting into multi-gun training if you want to. And civilians are, not to say that cops are not or weren't appreciative, but it's part of the job, right? You're assigned to training, just like in the military. You're assigned to training, you report to training. It's another one of your functions. Some of us feel more passionate about it than others, but it's a function of your duty. Civilians have this overwhelming appreciation. It's almost like you're a personal trainer with a gun, right?
That's a good way to look at it. Yeah, I've never really heard of it.
Really
I've never really heard it like that.
And I do my classes largely as far as the amount of people that are in my classrooms. And I do have to, get them to a qualification, but I live by a very strict rule. I don't work. My instructor to student ratio is no more than 1-on-2. And especially if somebody's never touched a gun before, they're going to get one-on-one personal coaching from me. And I think it means a lot to be able to do that, not only from a safety perspective, but if you're paying me for my time, you're going to get 100% of me. And that's where that appreciation really goes a step farther. And I develop relationships where I'm doing one-on-one sessions. I'll do 2-on-1 sessions with either good buddies or spouses or, maybe, siblings, things like that. And what's been a pretty big growth or demand is, obviously, depending on where you live in the Hudson Valley, there's going to be some type of waiting period, right? Before you can get your handgun and get your license. Obviously, the further south you travel, the longer the wait, right? So once people come to a class and they're so excited and so motivated and want to continue this, they're going to be put on hold for a little while. And those folks who have home defense concerns or self-defense concerns, they're like, what can I do now? And kind of like my B side, if you will, if that even translates anymore, is home defense shotgun training, which again, there is continuity of training with the pistol, obviously different controls, different weapon systems themselves, but we're doing a lot of work with home defense shotguns, and there's such reliable, safe tools. And again, what are some of these people needing, Chris? They have this desire to feel empowered. They have this desire to want to feel safe in their own home. And it emotionally goes a long way with them.
I mean, I would have to agree wholeheartedly. And anybody that doesn't live in New York, it's hard for them to understand. And especially people that live upstate, they don't understand what it's like down, closer to the city here. You don't feel safe. It's a terrible thing that we live in a world where we don't feel safe in our own homes. And like we were talking about, I work in New York City, and like I hate it. I hate going there. And it's unfortunate that, even in New York City with the restrictive carry laws, you can't even protect yourself. And even when you do protect yourself, they're going to prosecute you as the bad guy. Like that one parking attendant that literally took the gun from the guy that shot him, shot the guy that shot him, and they're prosecuting the guy that got shot. But no, I fully agree with you that it's a need to feel secure. It's a need to feel safe. It's a need to kind of take that freedom back for yourself. Now, what would you say is like, I know you deal with a lot of civilians. Do you see a lot of younger people, women? Like what is a big demographic shift for you?
I'm really glad you brought that up, because kind of consistent with national statistics, my largest growth segment one of my higher populations of new students are middle-aged females.
It's understandable.
And consistent with, well, I shouldn't say middle-aged females. I would say there's a large range between, females from, in their 20s to females in their 50s. But I think that demographic is consistent with national statistics as well. And, it's kind of funny, and I want to just kind of present this, kind of comically as an anecdote, if you will. But, when I get phone calls from guys, who are interested in training, it's usually 1 or 2 phone calls. It's, I don't know about this class, but maybe next class, or, there's a little bit of little bit of vacillating back and forth, right? When a female calls me, she is either taking a class or locked in for a class in 72 hours or less. Once her mind is made up, there's no stopping.
I like to hear that.
It's kind of
like it's actually like it's almost comforting to hear that in a strange way. Like I'm glad people are out there actually like especially women in New York are committing to that. Like, again, they want to feel safe. They want to feel safe in their own home, and they're dedicating themselves to getting the training and the ability to be able to do that. I'm blown away. I'm 100% behind this.
And what's really interesting is a lot of people who call me, and again, this kind of like, you know, middle-aged female demographic. The conversation usually starts with, I never thought I'd ever say this, or I never thought I'd be making this phone call. And again, that's where I guess the emotional component comes in, because it's not just, hey, I'm going to take a class, I'm going to buy a gun. It's this personal investment into their safety, and you're their instructor, and they trust you 100%. Just like you know, in law enforcement and the military, where, you know, you look up to your instructor and you rely on your instructor to give you the life-saving tools, and it goes much further with civilians, and there's an emotional attachment for them and the need to learn.
Now, you've been doing this for a few years now. What would you, looking back on it, what would you say maybe some lessons learned that, you know, from the beginning to now that have kind of helped you progress the business? Maybe not even just the business, but your teaching style, your ability to translate your law enforcement experience to the civilian market.
So, you know, I've been a weapons and tactics instructor for over 22 years. I have trained thousands and thousands of people, both civilian and law enforcement alike, to not only shoot, but to progress, you know, with a firearm. And I want to be very frank with it, very clear and frank about what I'm saying. So, yes, is it ultimately a business? Of course. And do I have a corporation to protect me legally? Yes. Am I a businessman, Chris? I'm not going to say I am. I'm not a businessman. I'm an instructor to the core. And I need to do what I do as much as people need to have it. I guess in the beginning, you know, look, coming from, you know, over 20 years in law enforcement, civil service, you know, not having a business mindset. I guess when I started, I was not selling myself short, but being less exclusive. Where once my reputation was out there, and it came on pretty quickly, you know, I didn't need to, you know, do a used car sales pitch on anybody. You understand what I'm saying? You know, there's a very big difference between confidence and arrogance, and I think when we look at that, we could understand that. And at the risk of sounding arrogant, I've come to the point where, you know, my reputation is what it is. I'm not going to compromise with that. If you would like to work with me, please make the time to work with me. If you don't, or you're going to try to bargain or negotiate, or, you know, try to find, you know, some type of, you know, chink in my armor, call somebody else.
Now, I guess I guess we'll get into this before I get into some other questions. Now, if you could kind of go through your, I guess, your course list. Like, what are some, you know, you can list them all if you want, but like, what do you teach? What's your course list?
So, again, being you know, a one-man show, right? Being a sole proprietor, sole owner. I commit myself to an open program for one-on-one training. I will sit down with a potential student, or these are people who've come through my initial classes that want to continue with their training, and I'm going to get to know them personally as far as what are their limitations, what is their learning curve, what are their goals for either pistol operation, shotgun operation, or in some cases, which are, again, now, here in New York in today's day and age, whether or not folks will have any type of access to, an M4 variant or an M16 variant. But I custom design and custom fit my training based on the individual's goals and needs, and I work with their own learning curve. As far as large products are concerned, or what has become the biggest effort in my my product line, if you will, is when the law changed in 2022. The law, ironically, being referred to as the Concealed Carry Improvement Act of 2022, that is requiring 18 hours of documented training for first-time applicants anywhere in New York State. So if you're applying for a pistol license anywhere, including New York City, which New York City, believe it or not, hardest place to get a license, and never had a safety course requirement. So new applicants statewide. And because the way the law was written and the way licenses are issued, if you live in Westchester, the 5 boroughs of New York City, Nassau, or Suffolk County, where your license is technically renew, not recertify, you have to take the class within your first renewal period, which instead of being every 5 years now is every 3 years. So the 18-hour course, as it's referred to, has been my biggest product because of the demand and the need. And to be very frank with you, Chris, it's very physically demanding on me, insofar as the amount of classroom time and range coordination. So it kind of kicks my ass a little bit, in a good way. The way I kind of structure a lot of my range days is I will process my 18-hour students in the morning, and then allow for one-on-one sessions with private customized training. So that's kind of where I am. I don't want to come to a point where I'm going to offer a class where, let's say, because I have developed lesson plans and programs for introduction to tactics, and very similar to police recruit training. Because, you got a lot of police recruits that they've never touched a gun before in their lives either. And by the end of a week, they have to be shooting a state qualification course, which is not the easiest course to shoot. So it's kind of geared and designed toward that. But I have to be able to offer that product to people who are at the same level of skill, whether it has to do with holster operation, clearing malfunctions with immediate action drills, knowing how to reload. Everybody has to be on the same skill set in order for it to be safe. And that's priority always number one, is safe. So as my students are coming through and they're getting their licenses, that type of demographic is going to become larger, and then I could diversify that way as well.
Well, all right. So now I'm going to ask you a more personal question, because now that you kind of open the door, you tailor your classes individually. Now, what if I wanted to sign up for, say, using the musket for home defense 101 and bayonet actions in CQC?
Well, that sounds, I guess that would be my Minuteman product, right?
No, I had to ask. Listen, I've seen that meme too many times to not ask. I've been planning this since we booked you. I've been planning on asking that question. So.
Well, again, Chris, I would customize a program and a session based on your personal needs.
All right, there you go, folks. We got bayonets for CQB now.
We always did.
You know what? You're not wrong. You are not wrong. All right, so now we'll get into some fun questions here. Now, these are all going to be firearm related. So,
okay.
All right, I'm going to drop you anywhere on the planet fighting an unknown enemy. What's your go-to main battle rifle?
An M4.
Okay. Why?
Why? Well, other than the obvious, the rate of fire, the efficacy of the 5.56, and of course a battle proven weapon system that has durability and reliability with and this is what a lot of folks don't understand as far as the M4 and its variants are concerned is the ability to keep this thing running without a trip to the gunsmith. People just don't understand that, and I think that's one of the reasons why we love our AR-15s and M4s, is because they're that customizable with the ability for your average person to keep the gun running with inexpensive part changes. I had very good formal M4 instructor training when my department had purchased their first amount of M4s and AR-15s through it was post 9/11, so they actually were bought on a 9/11 grant. It was an unfamiliar weapon system to everybody on the job. We were used to pistols and shotguns. So I and a couple colleagues of mine went to an M4 instructor school. It was being hosted by, at the time, a member of the 75th Ranger Regiment who was the head of training or the director of training at West Point. And it was an intense school, but it was a game changer for me. And then I with two of my colleagues, created our patrol rifle program in 2003, and it's still in place. So I have a lot of faith in that weapon system, but I am not going anywhere on planet Earth without a Glock.
Agreed. All right, now I'm going to drop you on a foreign planet.
Okay.
Fighting an unknown enemy. What's your weapon system?
The same.
Okay. All right, for the same reasons, I take it.
For all the same reasons.
Okay.
Look, as far as Glock is concerned, and for every time I say Glock, I wish I had some type of endorsement deal. I don't, sadly enough. My professional training has been with a Glock pistol. I have gone to, and look, I have a variety of different handguns. I really do. And Smith & Wesson, great manufacturer. Sig Sauer, great manufacturer. No surprise, I have a variety of guns and from different manufacturers. But what I have seen with the Glock is just, it's what they promise. It's inherent reliability and durability. I have been to instructor level schools where, we've fired, 5,000-6,000 rounds in 3 days, and I've seen guns break and go down. I've never seen a Glock go down.
I don't think I've ever even heard of a Glock going down.
For folks who don't like the Glock, and I understand and I appreciate it, the Glock trigger is not very user friendly, right? It's designed for safety and reliability. And I try to, and forgive me if this doesn't sound like an appropriate analogy, to kind of like the archery world. Like, how certain bows have a stiff back wall, if that's proper enough to say. Well, I try to explain the Glock trigger as the Glock trigger has a wall. You press till you get to the wall, and then you press through the wall, as opposed to saying, oh, I'm getting resistance, I'm getting more tension, I got to apply more pressure, and then you over manipulate the trigger. So yeah, true story. The Glock trigger is not the smoothest trigger on the market. It's not, but it wasn't designed for that. It's designed for safety. But once you master the Glock trigger and understand its reset point, again, there's no more reliable handgun, I think, on the planet. And unfortunately, I'm not getting a check to say that.
Listen, that's all right. And I kind of, I agree with you 100%. And I think your bow analogy is actually very fitting for the Glock trigger. I'm a proponent of Glocks myself, and maybe I'm wrong for saying this, but the Glock was designed with one thing in mind. And so forgive me, everybody, for saying this, but the Glock handgun was designed as a combat pistol at the end of the day.
And what I think is most compelling about that story is that Gaston Glock, the creator of Glock, wasn't a gun guy. It wasn't like a John Moses Brown.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or the founders of Sig Sauer. This was a chemical engineer experimenting with polymers.
You hear that, Rob? Engineers for the win again. So
yeah.
All right. Optics. Now, do you get into optics in any of your classes?
So, because the vast majority of my students are first time pistol license applicants, um, I introduced the concept of a red dot and an optic. I'm going to be very frank and blunt and say that I'm not going to call myself a red dot shooter. I flirt with a red. Actually, I cheat with a red dot, for lack of a better word. And I don't even like the word cheating. I prefer a tactical edge or a tactical advantage. Um, my one of my everyday, carry pistols is a Glock 43X MOS with the RMS, the Shield RMS C optic, and it's mounted from the factory. It was a collaboration with Glock and Shield, and it's a very flush cut, where you don't need suppressor height sights. It's nice and flush. They co-witness with the factory sights. So when I present that pistol, um, I'm still looking for my iron sights because I have so many years of shooting irons, and my red dot just happens to be there, and I'm like, great. But I'm not gonna lie to you and tell you I'm a red dot shooter. I have a full size Sig P320, with a Sig Romeo 1, that I take out of the safe every now and then, and I'm still kind of, I guess you could say, casually shooting red dots, but with almost 27 years of professional training and literally millions of rounds downrange, my eyes, looking for my sights. Maybe I'll progress to that, but it's certainly, look, here's one of the benefits I love about red dots, right? Once you learn how to operate a red dot properly, obviously you're getting faster target acquisition. But another, I think, tactical benefit to it, which, I can make an analogy for a rifle scope versus, shooting a 30-30 with iron sights, is that your field of view. And one of the most important, crucial elements in a self-defense situation is threat assessment and reassessment. And having the ability to have both eyes open, having a field of view, I think does give you a tactical advantage for threat assessment, as opposed to, having a limited field of view.
All right. Now we do have a good question here from Johnny Nitro. Do you train with weak hand shooting?
Of course. Of course. That was I mean, every police department has, their own qualification courses, or they utilize the state course. It's part of, recruit training as well. But my department's qualification course has always had a one hand unsupported component of it. And I'm left eye dominant. I would say I consider myself a right-handed shooter because I do a lot of things righty, so I have more speed and dexterity with my right hand. But I shoot equally well with my left hand, both supported and unsupported. One of the things that I incorporate in my personal training for myself are incapacitation drills, where, making the gun work, whether it's got to be loaded, unloaded, reloaded, clearing malfunctions with just one hand, using the rear sights. And obviously, if you have an optic mounted pistol, you could use the optic, against the heel of your boot, against your holster, against your belt buckle. And I say with all candor, I'll use my bottom teeth if I have to. So yeah, I really focus on that, and those are skills that I do bring to the table when I've had my folks evolve to a point where they're ready to transition from a beginner to an intermediate tactical operator, or hopefully to get there. But I think it's really, really important. And the one thing I've always loved about it is, I always think of your opposite hand or support hand as a fresh brain, a fresh student, who's more willing to learn, more willing to listen, and, because you're taking that extra step to apply it on something that's relatively unfamiliar. When I went to an NRA law enforcement pistol school, it was an instructor school. That particular school, every drill you fired, strong hand, you had to fire weak hand. And, I progressed well through it because I had that background, but some guys were struggling because they never use that hand other than, support hand placement. And I think it's a life-saving skill.
No, 100%. Now, do you use any simulated blood or anything like that to kind of make it harder on yourself or on your students or anything like that?
Have I come to the point? No, I haven't. I probably would be good. I mean, when I and I'll be very frank from a safety perspective, because again, everything comes back to safety. Um, when I do drills like that with my students or even with my cops, and I still have plenty of cops that I train. They come to me just before qualification time, brush up on their skills and so forth. I have done all of the incapacitation drills with them, with dummy rounds in a dry fire environment. I'll make the extra step for me, but you know, for me that's my own personal training with
Yeah.
myself. But I have to keep it safer for other people, especially you know in a large environment.
Yeah. And the reason I ask that is, I always like to pick people's brains about different ways of training because
I think
I
that's a
like
great
to learn
idea,
myself.
Chris.
Um,
I could certainly incorporate that into a dry fire incapacitation drill for sure.
yeah,
Kind of,
one of the things that I've actually seen people use that was actually kind of effective and really kind of opened my eyes, maple syrup to simulate
yeah,
blood. I mean, granted, you're, you know,
hell of a cleanup job.
well, that's it. Yeah, you better have an oil bath for your gun after that. But it was an interesting take on training that. It's everywhere. It makes it so much harder to do everything, and it was actually interesting watching the videos on that. So that's why I asked that question. All right, so let me get back to the. I guess we'll kind of get the business in here. Do you have any like what are some future goals? Maybe not even just growing the business, but for expanding your brand. We'll put it like what do you have any goals of for a year down the road, 5 years down the road, anything like that?
I guess what I said earlier, where I have a student body that is are at similar levels of competence that I can offer, the next logical product, on a larger level. But I'm putting the time investment in that now, and um, having folks that I'm working with one on one to and I shouldn't say secretly because it's not a secret. I'm consciously trying to get everybody to that particular level. So I think I'm investing time into that. As far as the amount of time I could put in a classroom at a range, and this is going back to my spinal injuries. It's really kind of limited. And I learned that lesson really hard last year. Last year, Westchester County in particular had put in the end it became unenforceable, but a, a compliance date of August 31st of last year for folks who had already been granted concealed carry licenses in Westchester to provide proof of training. It was an overwhelming demand. And again, we're not talking about, 4 hours in a classroom, 2 hours on a range. You're talking 18 hours, 3 days of my time. And I was accommodating a lot of private groups. Had very large class sizes, and it was all very manageable, but physically it took a toll on me. And even having concerns that your blood pressure spiking, and being in constant pain, being uncomfortable. Spending 2 days a week at the acupuncturist, hoping to get a spinal epidural. Those are ways that I manage my condition, so I continue to do what I love to do. And I had to kind of rethink my plan for this year, having larger uh, public class opportunities, and having a schedule all the way through the year that if somebody calls me to say, look, me and my buddy, we really want to take your next class, but we can't do it when you're offering it. Well, here's my schedule for the year. And again, and that's where I basically say, not from a level of exclusivity, but I'm worth it. I'm worth your time. So you need to make time for me. And I'll be there for you 100%. And that's just basically how I do it. I mean, so the other thing is, one of the reasons why I don't have a website, is because a lot of, I would say, the vast majority, 80% or more of my student body has or originated from some type of law enforcement referral. I'm not quite at the 7 steps to Kevin Bacon yet, but I'm at probably 4th or 5th, maybe 6th generation of people who were personally referred to me that has originated through other students of mine who originally had come through someone in the local law enforcement community. So in that particular sense, you know, here's the day-to-day reality of it. How can you really vet someone who is interested in your training? You know, there are different learning curves out there. There are people with different philosophies, different mindsets, levels of skill, levels of carelessness. So I'm kind of keeping it close to the family, where I'm generally very, very satisfied with the student who comes to me, if that makes sense. You know, where you feel comfortable and confident enough to pass those skills on.
No, that's completely understandable. I mean, I get it, and because even in the military, you see people come out, they have no idea what they're doing. Then you have people that actually have an idea what they're doing, and it's you don't want to be training with the guys that don't know what's going on.
Yeah, and the guys that don't know what they're doing usually are really good at writing resumes, right?
Yes, that is actually 100% true. So we've kind of blown through the hour mark here. I do want to give you the opportunity before we wrap things up here. If you could tell everybody where they can find your content and how they could get in touch with you about training.
So being a pretty low tech guy, and we joked about that earlier. And one of my taglines when I teach my classes, when I try to tell people how low tech I am, is that I still go grocery shopping with a bow and arrow, right? So I could manage with my low tech skills pretty much Instagram. You could find me on Instagram at Silver Lake Tactical. And in my contact profile, I do have my email address and my phone number. And I take emails, calls and texts all day long. I prefer to have that one-on-one conversation. I'm not looking to work with somebody who just saw my class on a roster somewhere, signed up for it and shown up. And I want to have that one-on-one conversation with you for a lot of reasons. Not only do I want to get to know who you are and give you the ability to get to know me personally, but I also want to understand what your goals are and where you're coming from. So I'm willing to put in that individual time investment in those phone calls, in that getting to know somebody. And I think it just comes to a better relationship between me and all my students.
Well, there you go, everybody. If you're not already, please head over to Silver Lake Tactical and smash that follow button. So,
Chris, I really, really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for inviting me. This was really, really fun, and even greater to get to know you even better.
Oh no, definitely, Vito. I appreciate that you took the time out tonight to come sit with. I was hoping the other guys would have at least been able to come on for a little bit, but it was definitely great chatting with you tonight, and I can't thank you enough for making the time tonight to sit down with us.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it.
So, with that, everybody, if you're not already, please head over to Silver Lake Tactical, smash that follow button, check out Vito's stuff. Believe me, he's got a lot of good videos up there. There's something for everybody. You will learn something. One more time, in case you haven't, please reach out to Dave, myself, or Rob. Get entered in our 2024 fundraiser raffle. This is your last chance. Next Friday, we are doing the drawing live right here on the show. So please tune in next week. We will be here. We will be picking the winner. So yeah, thank you everybody for watching. Vito, again, thank you so much for being a supporter of the show and taking some time out to talk with us tonight. And with that, everybody, I hope everybody has a good night. Good luck to everybody in the turkey woods, and we'll see you next week.
Amen. Thank you, Chris.